So hi everyone, my name is Nicholas, and I'm a current intern, a rising junior at Stanford, and today I'd like to talk about my passion for music and how my relationship with music might shed some insight in your own life. Yeah, I played.
Which instrument? Is that your composition or?
No, that was a piece by Chopin. It was on. I played it on the piano about 2 years back, I think. So, what was going on in that kind of piece? That what you just heard was called I think it was the Goatherd by the Goatherd Etude by Chopin. And what was going on was that under the surface, there's a lot of things going on. There was my physical interaction with the keyboard, of course, like how I was listening to the piece and my hands as they were touching the piano, as well as the mental component, which is kind of taking the musical ideas and wrangling them into something cohesive, as well as an emotional aspect, creating deep meaning out of that, and a social aspect, making sure that you, listeners, enjoy the experience. So, why I bring that up is I believe there are 4 dimensions to living a good life. The physical dimension, the mental dimension, social, and spiritual. And for me, music is a really good combination of all 4 of these. It's pretty obvious, or it's easy for me to see how like all these things come into play, and today I'd like to argue to you that like it's the interplay of these and the harmony of them with yourself that creates a good life. So let me start with the physical. So as I was saying earlier, there's a visual component of music, which most people don't think about, which is when you're first learning a piece, often it's translated through a visual medium. So in this case, since it's classical music, it usually has a bunch of keyboard notes, which I follow, as well as, of course, the audio component, where I'm actively listening to what I'm playing, and the touch component, where I am interacting with the keyboard. And to make a good performance, it is the harmony of these that creates a deep connection between you and the instrument. It's the difference between, say, maybe a 5-year-old just like kind of plunking around the keys and an experienced pianist. Like, you can tell they are deeply interconnected into the instrument. And so, why is this important? I think it's important because in our life we usually desire to have a deep connection with someone or something, and in this case, as a musician, it is really easy, or after long years of work, there's that connection that's built up between you and the instrument you play. There's also the mental component of it, which people don't think of quite as much. Playing on stage, especially when you're a soloist, having the entire concert hall all to yourself is a pretty daunting task. It's almost akin to running a marathon, except that as you're running the marathon, like, everybody's looking at you for, or God knows how long. And at the same time, though, this marathon that you're running consists of unifying a bunch of different ideas. So this is actually a visualization of a piano piece. So you can see here that there's a bunch of different lines going on denoted by the different colors. But at the same time, a lot of them are unified by similar trends. And what a very good musician does is he tries to make these trends apparent to the listener, so that you enjoy hearing the patterns in the music. And so I argue that in terms of the mental component, music, it is my means of kind of creating an intellectual self-expression and challenge which a good life needs. Another aspect of music is social. So during my high school years, actually, one of my favorite parts of being a musician was actually being in my high school orchestra. So you can see here, this is my high school orchestra in doing a concert. And it was a great time for me to kind of branch out and meet a bunch of different people and make great friends. But the beauty about music is that it doesn't have to be in like a structured setting. All you need to do is have some friends who enjoy playing music as much as you do, and then it's really easy to just kind of meet up together and jam. And this, from what I remember, it was a very popular thing, especially in the 90s, when people would just make their own rock bands as teenagers. And that's one of the nice things about music, is that it gives you a reason to bring people together and enjoy each other's presence. And arguably, that one of the defining characteristics of being human is forming a community and enjoying the company of others. And last but not least, the spiritual aspect is perhaps the most important. One of the reasons why you hear music at weddings or funerals or pretty much any important event you can think of is because music has this additional meaning to it. And this meaning isn't just a bunch of sounds played in a purely physics sense. There's something going on, and I argue that this meaning comes from what we tend to ascribe to music. So when we hear a chord or an idea or something or anything of that nature, we tend to associate things which give it meaning beyond just what the physics of sound represent. And so, one of the great things about music is that it is a medium to express this kind of desire that we all have to ascribe meaning to our lives, to kind of interpret what we see around in the world and kind of make sense of it, and ultimately derive a bunch of meaningful self-satisfaction from that. And you'll notice when I was talking throughout all these characteristics, I emphasized the characteristic of harmony. So in the physical sense, it was harmony between you and instrument. In mental, it was between you and the composer's intentions. In social, it was harmony between you and your audience. And spiritual, well, that's harmony between you and your interpretation of the world. And ultimately, when you bring these characteristics into unison with each other, whether it's through music or through whatever passionate medium you choose, that is what gives you a great sense of fulfillment and happiness in your life.
Are there any questions from the audience?
I can go first. So that was a very beautiful piece that you played, and you played like a pro. My question is, how long did you learn to get to that level where you were playing that well? When did you start learning?
So I started when I was 5, and I kind of it was kind of a thing that my parents did to get me to play piano. I will say though that it is less of a matter of time and more of a matter of how committed you are to it, because as a pianist, I found that when I wasn't really committed to playing a piece, it would take me months to even create something that sounded okay. But if I was really committed, I could probably create a really polished piece in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It's really about how much time and effort and commitment you want to make to a piece that determines how fast you become a really great pianist.
Did you form your own rock band?
No, actually, no. I'm more of a classical guy, so.
A classical band?
Yeah, I'm a classical person.
Do you still play with your high school friends?
Not as much. Since we're all in college, we're all in different parts of the country, so it's hard to kind of find the time to get back with them.
We'd love to have a concert of you and your friends in Cisco.
maybe.
Any classical concert, because it's very rare, right? Not many people do it, so it's very great and rare at the same time.
I have a question based on the quadrant that
Yeah.
you mentioned. So you say it's physical, mental, social, and spiritual.
Yeah.
I guess the first experience you have socially is with your own self, where you kind of have this defining moment where you are confident with the first piece you play on your own, despite your parents putting you into this and conditioning you into it at a young age.
Yeah.
So keeping all that in mind, which was the first piece that you recollect from your memory that you played that actually resonated with all the 4? And your favorite?
That's a really good question. So, I've played a lot of pieces over the years, so I've really liked quite a few of them, but in particular, there's one piece which I don't think we have the time for, but I actually have the file. I can get the file, but there was one particular piece which basically combined all 4 of them. I guess a little bit less social because that was it was of course a solo piece, but it was called the Liszt Transcendental Etude, number 12, and basically for that piece, it was right after I finished, right after college apps were over, and I had a little bit of extra time on my hands, so this is what I was talking about earlier. I had a bunch of time, so this piece was really awesome when I listened to it, so I decided to make a thorough commitment to doing it. And within a month, I got from knowing zilch about it to being able to make a recording of it. And so that piece, I think what made that piece so special and why I was able to keep doing it was because at every single point when I was practicing, even when I was playing when it didn't sound like the original, I enjoyed what I was doing, and like the spiritual part, or like the kind of like the piece just basically kind of resonated with whatever sort of artistic vision I had at every single point. And so that's why I kept playing it and got it to such a great place. Yeah.
I really liked the piece and the presentation. I'm also a musician, I play guitar. One thing I found when I would be trying to learn pieces is just that at the beginning, when you're trying to get the muscle memory to play the sequences, and you're trying to know what it's supposed to sound like and get the timings right and everything, it's a lot more robotic. It almost emphasizes the physical and mental aspects of it, but then once you become more comfortable with the piece and you can remove the sheet music or remove the tabs, then you kind of find yourself expressing yourself through the music a little bit more and accentuating certain notes or getting a better feel for the music. Did you find that as well as you learn songs, that eventually you get to a point where you get more of an emotional release or gratification out of playing it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like when I remember when I had a piano, back when I was still playing with my piano teacher, one of the things I would get kind of frustrated with was as soon as I got the physical and mental part down, and I felt ready to work on the social and spiritual part, she would just cut me off early, and then we'd work on a new piece. So, and that was kind of like, I can get so much more mileage out of this piece. But now what you said is exactly right. Also, I don't blame myself because I was just a little kid back then, but as an adult, one of the advantages you have is being able to think more logically. So looking back, there are a lot of kind of attitudes I had towards practice, which really didn't lead to effective practicing. And I think one of them was like I would get too obsessed with kind of the silly mistakes I made every so often. I guess that plays more into the mental component, and also just maturity that you get when you get older. That it's okay to make mistakes as long as you keep iterating and kind of improving. Then eventually, at some point, you'll reach that level of really well-polished music that you want.
Is it true that the well-polished music, especially for musicians, be it guitar or piano, is it true that if it's not for you to actually understand the piece end to end and to kind of have it in your long-term memory, you need to kind of sharpen your spiritual aspect towards kind of orchestrating the whole experience of playing it rather than just keeping it physical and mental. Like you said with your teacher, you got the physical and mental aspect part right, but once you came towards the social or spiritual side, you went right to the next piece. So for you to retain that kind of music naturally, for you to play anytime, any day perfectly, should that spiritual bond be there between the musician and the instrument, or musician and the piece, or rather the spiritual playing be more sharpened in that case?
I think there are two components to that. So one of them is kind of the more obvious component of when you get better at something, you'll just like it more. So I feel like this is a lot of explanation for why people have passions. Once people get really good at something, then they become passionate for it because it's like a natural habit by that point. But another component of it is kind of going to the social aspect, which is as a musician, one of the most important, one of the defining differences between a musician and maybe just a person who is playing an instrument is the musician will actually take time out of his day to go listen to pieces of music that he really likes, and I'm sure most of us have like pieces of music that we like, but the musician will take the kind of inspiration from those pieces and then put it into the piece he's playing. That's kind of the spiritual part of it, is that like you derive some sort of satisfaction from seeing like your interaction between like people who are already like in the world and like playing the piece that you and have all these good ideas as that you hear, and then you put it in and you recreate those ideas in your own work.
Any other questions? Any questions from the people on the phone?